Hey Arjit, how are you?
Hi Paritosh, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, Arjit. Thank you so much for taking our time and talking to us.
Thanks to you, yaar, for giving me this platform to have a chat with you, which could hopefully benefit a lot of others in the ecosystem.
My pleasure. I mean, see, I'm really excited, to know more about the things that you are doing, things that you have already done, right, at various organizations. तो उसके बारे में I'm curious to know, right? I'm sure our viewers would be curious to know. तो वहीं से start करते हैं, right? We'll start quickly about, your journey till March VC. आप भारत इनोवेशन फंड में थे, आई थिंक उससे पहले आप आईआईएमए वेंचर्स में भी थे, तो यू हैव a lot of venture capital experience. So please let us know about that. Begin कैसी हुई है जर्नी है VC में?
Thanks, yaar. So I think let me go back a few steps, even
Hmm,
from IMA Ventures, right? I was
sure.
somebody who was very excited about projects during my B school. And I always thought that there is a lot of excitement and a lot of insights that you can draw from running businesses, working with folks who run businesses, helping them in the journey. So straight out of college, I joined a company called EY, which is a big four company, very well known
Yeah,
for
yeah.
many verticals that they currently run. And I was a part of their transaction advisory team, जहाँ पे हम लोग valuation, M&A, etc. type की चीजें करते थे. Um, Very solid learnings to understand what mature businesses look like, how do they measure their KPIs, what are some of the risks that they
Hmm,
foresee, how do they capitalize, how do they grow, what do directors think like, how do investors think like when they invest in such companies whenever there's an acquisition also.
hmm,
uh, but what got me excited were some conversations where we used to do uh, some work for a lot of venture capital funds and their portfolio, and that got me really really excited about the early stage scheme of things, which is what
hmm.
led to me starting to looking out for places where I can get that experience of either being a startup founder myself or working with some other startup founders. So after a solid stint at EY, I thought I should move into the early stage ecosystem. I was very fortunate that my partners there also supported. In fact, one of them said that, "Hey, if I was your age, I would have, taken that leap of faith." And I'll always be grateful for that advice, right? Uh,
Okay.
so at that time, there was an opportunity with IMA Ventures to help the.
Back when?
This was I joined IMA Ventures in 2015,
Okay.
and 2 years at EY maybe prior to that.
Huh.
2015 is when I joined IMA Ventures, and which was called CIIE.co back then. Uh,
Hmm,
there was an opportunity to work with the team there and the startups there to help them raise capital from the accelerators that we used to host back then, and also to syndicate those deals with other investors in the ecosystem. So at
hmm,
that
right.
time, startup asset class 2015 was still very new, but it was getting hot. There were a lot of traditional business folks who were starting to get interested that can we be angel investors in companies? How do we work with them? How do we help them, etc. So I think that also became a very defining moment in my career because I think I find a lot of joy in helping startups as such, right? खुद तो startup किया था बीच में. I tried, didn't make beyond day 90, tried to run a non-profit with some of my friends, found a lot of
Huh.
hurdles on the ambitious projects that we wanted to do, but some of the simpler
Okay.
projects we were able to execute, right? So थोड़ी सी empathy थी, थोड़ा सा ambition था कि startup space और founders के साथ कुछ कुछ नॉन
Hmm,
लीनियर करने में उनकी कैसे हेल्प की जा सकती है. So I think that was solid foundation at that time. Spent maybe like a year or two there in figuring out building an angel investor network, which also meant that I had to go and educate people on what angel investing is.
hmm,
Right? What are the sort of metrics that you look at? How should you look at this asset? Look at this asset class. How much of your portfolio percentage should be dedicated here? How do you also slice it across multiple startups? Is it is it ever going to give you money, or is it just for like fun, etc., right? So those kind
Right,
of
right.
questions keep coming in.
तब तो बहुत ज्यादा मुश्किल होगा, इनफैक्ट आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट 2015, तब तो बहुत ज्यादा मुश्किल होगा आई बिलीव.
आई वोंट से मुश्किल होगा, अर्ली था, मतलब इतना बज नहीं था
हाँ.
स्टार्टअप के अराउंड, बट पीपल हु वर रियली इंटरेस्टेड, they actually participated a lot. Like we had a very nice bunch of angel investors we used to work with. I think some of them still invest with IMA Ventures, and some of them
Hmm.
maybe more senior advisors to IMA Ventures as well. And they came from different walks of life, right? Somebody who's had a very large corporate stint, or somebody who's in the public market investing, somebody who runs an insurance company, somebody who runs a very large market agency. So there also
Hmm.
serendipitously or by design, uh, we were able to construct a sort of a board of angels who came from different backgrounds to assist on
Hmm.
multiple aspects of business. And then they chose
Okay.
what they want to invest, what they don't want to invest. My only learning there was that I was able to orchestrate a lot of this, and I was good with numbers, so I could position companies in a very transparent manner, uh, help investors understand the risk, etc. But I had a lot of learning from these investors as well, their thought process, as well as a lot of my team at IMA Ventures, right? These are some of the folks who actually set this up for a while. Some of them have run like companies, venture capital funds. So I was just absorbing knowledge at that point of time, right? And trying to test some bit of it when I went into conversations with other founders, etc. Uh, Little bit of charter expansion happened there, and I started building like a corporate network to work with
Hmm.
startups that IMA Ventures had invested in. And the team there, I was probably the youngest member in that team, actually started reaching out to corporates and saying, hey, here is a asset class called startups which are going to bring innovation to you. Can we be the people who can play a part in introducing you to them? And then you figure out, you want to give a POC, you don't want to give a POC, you want to move it to a contract. And we used to host multiple versions of events, meetings, discussions, etc., which led to a couple of great outcomes, right? Somewhere some corporate guy came in as an investor in the
Hmm.
company. Some company got
Great.
a check from the corporate entity. Some companies got contracts from a corporate entity, etc. So that started happening because even the corporate realm was waking up to the fact, and I'm talking mostly about Indian corporates or MNCs that have Indian presence. I have not gone outside India yet.
Okay.
This corporate realm was getting a lot excited about what is happening in the startup space. How can they disrupt us? And before they disrupt us, can we partner with them or acquire them, etc.? Stuff which was very common and very well talked about in the Western markets. So that was getting,
Hmm.
very new in India. Uh, that led to me becoming a part of a much larger initiative that came from IMA Ventures called the Bharat Fund, right? And Bharat Fund itself, was a thesis that was created because of identifying certain gaps in the ecosystem around deep tech and Series A. So we realized that deep tech ecosystem in India is hard, is challenging. There are not a lot of players, a lot of supporters. At that time, we could count the number of funds on our fingers. Now I think it's a very stark difference today, right? And I
Yeah.
think last week a very momentous thing that happened for the deep tech ecosystem was Agnicool launching
Yeah.
their
Of
rocket
course. Hmm.
and sorted, right? So now I think the deep tech ecosystem is getting there and trying to make the mark. At that time, it was quite empty. Early stage, you had a few incubators, angels, etc. But Series A, there was nobody. I mean, there were very few, right? And there was a
Hmm.
nice gap where capital could be deployed, startups could have been supported. So I, along with one of my partners, then went with a begging bowl to a lot of LPs. I was very fortunate as a very young member to get that exposure, that what is fundraising like. And probably I feel investing in a fund is slightly easier, but fundraising and finding exits which come at the start and the
Hmm.
end are probably the harder parts of running a venture capital fund, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what defines you as a team, that confidence around your team, and the confidence in the ability of the team when you come to those exits as well, right? And then exits also drive next fundraise, etc., in some shape and form. So that's when it started happening. we had a corp dev team at Bharat. I was a part of it. Used to work with my partners, support them in whatever they needed in terms of data, in terms of some thesis work, etc. So very very fresh, very exciting, non-monotonous experience.
Mm.
Very humbling because when you go fundraising, you hear no more often than yes, right? And this is something
Yeah.
that founders will also talk about, that we pitched to 100 companies. Out of them,
Mm.
five actually were the ones who took it to the second or third level of conversation, right? So empathy towards founders increased all the more fold, right?
Mm.
We were able to raise that fund. I then worked with the team in finding the right bridge between our portfolio and corporates, a few investments, a lot of thesis work. So very very fortunate at a young age to get that exposure, and thanks to my partners there who sort of believed in me significantly, and still are people who I go to every now and then to seek their advice and just catch up on how things are evolving. um, Somewhere then I got the opportunity to get in touch with Shashank, who's the co-founder
Mm.
and currently the MD at Razorpay. He started Razorpay along with Harshil, who is the co-founder and CEO. They were thinking about building an initiative. I think it was named by then. It was called Marshot, and there was like a small press release around it uh, with some investments that they had done in their angel capacity. This is 2021 timeframe, post I think the unicorn round at Razorpay, and then once founders become popular, people start reaching out to them, especially
Yeah.
within the
Yeah.
level one network, that hey, we're trying to do something, etc. And Harshil Shashank founders who built Razorpay for startups. I think the first customers were startups, and this is in Jaipur, right? If you've heard this story as well.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
I think if you build a robust solution for startup, the problem statement and the convenience, the problem statement is the highest, and the convenience that you
Mm.
drive with the startup is also significant. Then it becomes a very solid product to even go and pitch to enterprise. Right? Enterprise sales is a different
Mm.
ball game. I'll not get into
Yeah.
that, but they were somebody who actually thought about startups, that how can we build multiple interventions for startups as such. So there's Marshot today, which exists, and I'll throw some light on it. But also within Razorpay, they have a very nice community called Razorpay Rise, where there is a curated set
Mm.
of founders, startups building in the tech realm who become each other's friends. Um, uh, there are many discussions around and queries around, is this agency good to work with? How did you go and solve this problem at your startup? How do you retain all of that, right? And it's a very very nice group where very intimate conversations happen across a curated set of couple of hundred startups, right? Um, so I felt that it's a very interesting journey to be a part of. And at that time,
Mm.
Marshot was very, very nascent, right? There's a gentleman called Vishnu Acharya who currently heads strategy and corp dev at Razorpay. He was like, moonlighting on this role to sort of, prove ki
Okay.
if, is this a car worth pushing, right? And that's when I
Uh,
got in touch with Shashank, and then had the fortune of speaking to a lot of the other team members who are, my colleagues, my partners in crime at Marshot as well. And I felt, this is an interesting challenge to take, right? One, I get to work with the best founders and operators in India, which is the
yeah.
Razorpay team. Two, along
Yes.
with them, I get to work with hopefully what becomes or is known to be the best founders and operators of India, which could be Marshot portfolio. So got in certain discussions to understand the motivations of starting this up. How do they look at it today? How does it evolve in a couple of years, etc. And decided to move to Marshot to take a challenging role that adds a lot of value to the ecosystem. As I said, I'm somebody who gets driven by how do I help founders more, and this opportunity was much larger in terms of impact that I could do, and the kind
Mm.
of learnings I could have, right? So that's how Marshot also happened.
That's great. That's great. I'm really, mesmerized by your journey. Sort of feeling envy over here, actually. Because, like you said, you were in EY and back then 2015. 2015, I would say, I mean, when you were in EY, that it would be around 2012, 13. 14, ठीक है, which we can practically say was sort of the actual augment of the VC industry. 2008 से कह सकते हैं, but 12 में since because of coming of the AIF regulations and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
you entered the ecosystem when the ecosystem sort of was just starting out. So which is great, which is really, really great. So yeah, I mean, coming back to Marshot, आप ये बता सकते हैं कि what's behind the name? How did what's the story behind Marshot?
Got it. So the name happened before I came in,
अच्छा,
but whatever I've heard, there are few versions of it, and I'll talk about them. But before that, let me talk about the motivations behind Marshot, and I'll probably then marry it to the name, right?
yeah,
So I think everybody agrees that starting a company is a very lonely journey, even if you have
hmm,
employees, co-founders, investors, mentors, etc. You're like a lone ranger that you feel every day. You wake up, you go to work, you're like, I have to do something. You have to stay motivated, figure out long-term vision, etc. So I think the team thought, and this is our thought process today, that can we be um, friends on the cap table? Can we be a non-formal sounding board for founders whenever they want to discuss things which are going great, of course, but especially when things are
hmm,
not going great, right? In times of trouble, in times of doubt, in times when there's a lot of concern around any aspect of business, right? Should I hire an HR
yeah,
now? To when should I start building my augmenting my sales team? What is startup
yeah,
culture like, etc.? And the team at Razorpay, the founding team, actually figured out a lot of these things on their own. Of course, they would have had
hmm,
investors and mentors who have helped them, but they felt that the ecosystem should be doing a lot more, right, than just
hmm,
helping out with capital. So I think
right,
that was the foundation of Marshot, that we've solved hard problems. We've gone through a very hard journey of now 9 years plus. Can we make your journey a little bit easier? Right. And in that journey, can we become friends with great founders who hopefully make companies that have really large outcomes to add to India's economy? Right. So businesses add to India's economy, and startups are going to be the businesses of the future. Right. Look at any
hmm,
large companies as we call them now, but they were startups at some point in time.
yeah,
So
totally.
that was the approach, putting small angel like checks, but going and participating in rounds of multiple companies as so that we can be their support system whenever they need us. And
Hmm,
I think the team consciously didn't want to keep themselves restricted to fintech. They said that we'll go beyond fintech and SaaS. So if you look at our portfolio, we have companies like maybe a stable money or a dhan or a check in fintech, and then we have companies like a top line or a Contlo or a rephrase which got acquired by Adobe in SaaS. But
hmm,
we've actually gone and made investments in sectors beyond that as well, right? In education and learning, we have a company called Newton School, or a company called Air Black. In the consumer side of things, right, which is something which was very new for us. We had an investment like in a company called Ultra Human, in a company called Anveshan, a very interesting creator-led consumer company called House of X.
yeah,
Experimented with QSR with the check-in samosa party, and then we've gone and made another QSR investment in Boba Bhai, but also
hmm,
looking at models that are going beyond the top 1% of India, right? Which is where we've had a little bit of portfolio around the Bharat side of things as well, with a company called Super K, which is building retail stores
retail
in
stores in
very
tier 2
very
plus.
small
Yeah,
towns and villages, in Telangana, and then a company called Apni Bus that enables people to book buses and travel and have some predictability around buses that are running very interior corridors of India, and so on and so forth. So that's the and we've kept that breadth a little bit wider as well in terms of sector, and in terms of stage also it is slightly wide. Of course, sweet spot is seed, where there is some early signs of PMF, but we've gone and invested in companies early as an exception, or slightly late also as an exception. So I think
hmm,
that's something that is a little bit more different than typical funds that you come across or angel investor ecosystem, because it's really driven by the operators, who at Marshot, uh, and that is something that I think if we were a fund that had raised money from the market, etc., it would have been slightly different. So it's also an experiment today, right? We still
Hmm.
have to see what exits come out of here. Some of them have started to happen, but I think a significant portfolio exit should happen in a couple of years. We're just in the third year of our journey today. Uh, but that's the goal, right? Walking that extra distance, walking that extra mile with the founders we invested.
Hmm.
And typically in the venture ecosystem, you will hear about startups that are called moonshots, right? SpaceX
Yeah.
was a moonshot. Agnikul was a moonshot, let's say.
Okay.
We'll walk that extra mile, right? We'll go beyond the moon. We'll go to Mars with you, right? So
Right.
that's one narrative. The other narrative is that, when somebody was trying to find the URL, this was an interesting URL that was available in
Okay.
this thing. So I don't know which one is what, but
Well, both works.
yeah, both works. But I think that's the ethos of Mars Shot as such.
Right. Right. You also briefly mentioned, so actually that made me curious, that you didn't have to raise any funds because, of course, Mars Short is a founders fund basically, right? They are giving back to the ecosystem. But you have worked with Bharat Innovation Fund. You have raised money from corporates, from individuals. What how will you differentiate working in this two different setup where uh, in Marshot and as compared with Bharat Innovation Fund or IMA Ventures? Do you see any distinction in the way that you invest in startups or even the way you think?
For sure, yeah. I think there's a lot of difference, and it is
Hmm.
also because of the structure that an AIF follows, which is
Yeah,
compliance on the SEBI side, responsibilities to formal LPs that are corporates, and all of that,
right.
versus Marshot, which is still an experiment, uh, uh, which is something which is close to heart for a lot of these founding team members at Razorpay. Very frugal in our approach, etc.
Hmm.
But also it's also got to do with stage, right? So that is um, while Bharat Innovation Fund was a place where we did a lot of research, we did a lot of due diligence, figuring out that deep tech element in a company, and how that is differentiated, how is that IP led, and it is a Series
Hmm.
A fund, right? A Series A fund will typically cut lesser checks than an angel investor, if I have to compare it with. And a
Right.
Series A fund will also have slightly lesser capital to experiment with, right? To go in and say that, okay, this is an interesting company. Can we put in a small check, and then let's see how it sort
Hmm.
of goes ahead. Um, at Marshot, I think because it is an experiment of its own and a means to give back to the ecosystem, I was told on day one that Arjit, you have to invest in XYZ number of companies, which I felt was ambitious. Right? Really, I was like, okay,
Okay.
I've not done that, right? So if I have to meet this target, it means that I literally have to build rocket jet engines so that I can go at that speed, right? So
Ah.
that was a very, very different change, right? I had to unlearn and relearn new things. My typical process, which is followed at a VC fund, uh, got augmented to something really, really different at Marshot as well. So a lot of changes in terms of the way we work. I think the purpose remains the same. Um we are cutting more checks at Marshot every month in comparison to what a deep tech Series A fund would do. Just because of
Hmm.
the nature of the beast is very different, and
Yeah.
expectations on outcomes are also very different, right? At the end of the day, uh, LPs of Bharat Innovation Fund and my team members at Marshot want those returns, right? But the means and the
Hmm.
method to do it, the stage at which we're operating is very, very different. So one, I had to ramp up the amount of deals I was looking at, right?
Right.
And because
Right.
it's not deep tech, because it's now sector agnostic, and it is a competitive landscape, and this is I entered in 2021, which was the party year of the VC ecosystem.
Yeah.
There were deals happening by the hour,
Hmm.
right, in the ecosystem. If I have to put it in working hour context, from, let's say, two deals that I did in a year at a Bharat fund, and because we were, of course, early early investing cycle of the fund as well, and then reserve capital for follow on, I came to investing in two deals every week. That was the speed at which things change, right? And also because I've entered this new model at the
Hmm.
part year, and uh, and then you're like, if you have a little bit of a guidance on the target, which was just a guidance, right? It didn't mean that I'll actually go and invest in XYZ number of companies, because if I had to just meet the target, the quality of portfolio would have gone down significantly, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I've still not achieved that target. What number was given to me? I'm still a few short of that target in 3 years, right?
Huh.
But the quality of portfolio exists, right? And quality is also something that also changes after you invest a little bit. Founders also augment themselves to become better versions of themselves, learn significantly, etc.
Hmm.
So the speed at which we were investing, the speed at which I was making new connects in the ecosystem, who I could share deals with, who could share deals with me, a lot of effort in reaching out to other investors who are like-minded, who are okay to talk to us about certain thesis areas, certain startups that they are looking at. Can we be partners along with them on the cap table of startups that they are supporting, etc. So a lot of work went there, and at the same time, uh, a lot of work went in startup support, right? I mean, startup investing
Hmm.
is one part of what I do at Marshot, but the main mission, let's not forget it, was helping
To
founders
help
in,
them.
right? So hopping on calls with founders, scheduling calls with some of our founding team members, going deep into certain aspects of business, opening doors, figuring it out. So I think what I learned at Bharat Innovation Fund with the corporate network that I built, I was able to sort of apply that knowledge and sort of put that knowledge on steroids and put that execution on steroids to say that, okay, I was
Hmm.
onboarding one corporate a day, etc., but now maybe the corporate part of it is not as relevant because still early stage, product may still take some time to be enterprise ready. But I use that same approach in reaching out to a lot of other investors, a lot of other founders, a lot of other ecosystem players as well,
Hmm.
right? And then can we use existing network of our joint team to open doors, right? Wherever somebody wants to speak to a bank, somebody wants to speak to an NBFC, somebody wants to speak to a tech expert, somebody wants to speak to a
Right.
compliance expert, whatever it is, right? Can we open doors, right? So I think that really helped a stark difference, but I think there are some common things that sort of
Yep.
helped me.
Hmm.
And then a lot of learning, yeah, from my team, right? I mean, I don't know if I ever get a chance to even thank my team at Marshot, who've actually helped me think less like an investor and more like a operator or a startup founder, right? So I think that investor lens stays, but the way you execute, the speed at which you do it, etc., that's very different. I feel that, if I talk to a version of myself that is 3 years back, I think I'm a different person now thanks to these guys.
That's awesome. I think this would be a medium where you, from where you would be thanking the peer. I'll make sure
I,
that
I do I do
have
follow
this.
you now and then, but yeah, fair enough.
No, that's great. That's really lovely. Wow. And you mentioned Marshot has gone sector agnostic, right? Because the thesis is different, right? The philosophy is different. You want to help the founders, but again, do you at some point do you feel like you must also make some sort of strategic investments, or you have made some sort of strategic investments in at early stage, which could maybe later sort of get combined with Razorpay's product base or something like that.
No, great question. I get this question a lot, and we've
Okay.
tried to put a very disciplined approach to it. So
Hmm.
anything that is of strategic interest to Razorpay goes to the Razorpay Corp Dev team, right? So my friends, as I mentioned, Vishnu, who is my partner in crime at Marshot as well. He leads that charter. So anything that is of strategic interest goes to them to evaluate if there is some value to go in early. Uh, does
Hmm.
Razorpay invest in companies at pre-seed seed stage? Not really. So there is a relationship that we build. and then we take it from there. In some cases, we may find something of strategic interest as a company grows, pivots from the Marshot portfolio as well, right? It could be a SaaS product, it could be a fintech product, etc. And there have been some conversations, right? Nothing that has, I think, moved yet to that level, but I think that is maybe the maybe an angle that gets figured out every now and then. But that may be just limited to fintech and SaaS, as long as I can
Yeah.
think about, Razorpay roadmap. Having said that, I think I may use this opportunity to talk about something that we've been doing differently than a lot of other typical investors that you come across. There are
Hmm.
two buckets beyond the usual investor side of things where we've been investing, right? One is an experimental bucket, and maybe I'll take some examples there. And two is a bucket where we feel that these companies are the ones that are going to help us take the ecosystem to the next level, right? We're all ecosystem first at Marshot. So any
Hmm.
startup that is taking the ecosystem to the next level, we can be okay to put a check in them so that we can help them, and then they are the ones who will catalyze our help into significant
Hmm.
outcomes for the ecosystem and taking help from a lot of other cap table investors, right? So let me talk about this a little bit. uh, a couple of years back, a company called GrowthX was formed, and
Yeah.
this is a gentleman who was an ex Razorpay person as well. And the mission statement at GrowthX was that can we help individuals understand, adopt, and execute with a growth mindset, right? And they probably stitched up the largest angel round in terms of number of angels on the cap table at that time. Is it a typical VC scalable, exponentially scalable, 100x, 200x multiple sort of a company, which is what you will optimize for as a typical VC? Maybe not. But is it adding a 100x, 200x level of uh, outcome to the ecosystem? Yes. How? Because it's helping people in the corporate realm or in the mature startup realm think with a growth mindset, right? Approach problems with a growth mindset. And maybe if anybody who's watching this researches a little bit about them, they'll know uh, why we backed them and continue to do so many things with them. Similarly,
Hmm.
a company called Offline, which was started by a gentleman called Utsav Somani. He used to be a
Yeah.
part of AngelList India, and he also runs his own fund and is an active angel. Is building like a group of experienced operators and founders. There are certain qualifications that you need to meet so that people can freely exchange a lot of insights with each other, right? Be each other's sounding board, which felt like an extension of what we were trying to do as Marshot, right? So
Hmm.
we did that as well. Third, a very interesting company called Link 42. I don't need to talk about them, but we felt they were
Okay.
doing some really non-linear work, especially with a lot of the new stuff that they've started off on the courses side of thing, helping people understand what angel investing is, how can you be a great VC, how can you be a good founder or an operator, etc. And some of this may have some little bit of a competing flavor, but that's okay. I mean, we're okay to invest in companies that are either solving for the same market with a different approach or using the same approach in
Hmm.
two markets as such. So that
Right.
was one bucket. The second bucket that I want to talk about is the experimental bucket, where
Yeah.
okay, this is not like very obvious for us to invest in, but let's go and do that any which way. Uh, a case in point was maybe 2 years back, we spoke to the founders of AI Sensi, which is
Hmm.
a WhatsApp ecosystem startup. They enable businesses big and small with WhatsApp automation, WhatsApp communication with customers, sales through WhatsApp, etc. And these are a bunch of maybe at that time 20-year-olds. I don't think they've crossed 30 yet, right? um,
Hmm.
WhatsApp is a crowded category, right? There's so many other players, large players who've raised significant money. A lot of the revenue goes to Meta in revenue sharing. Can these guys
Yeah.
grow and become big, etc.? Were the obvious questions around it. But the sheer passion that the founders had during that conversation, I think, convinced us that we should take a little bit of a leap of faith and then invest. And since then,
Hmm.
they've been able to grow beautifully, right? They've raised a very small amount. till the last time I spoke to them, they've not even touched that capital. So they've been
Really?
driven,
Wow.
right? And they're doing some really non-linear stuff, becoming very well recognized partners with Meta, helping so many startups, helping, for example, the Delhi bus booking using a WhatsApp channel today, right? So the Delhi public transport bus can be booked via WhatsApp using AI Sensi. Another recent one that happened with us, we did a small experimental check in a company called Samosa Party, which helped us understand QSR retail a little bit better. And then came a founder who was starting up something in the bubble tea segment in India. Right? We met him at a event forum, and then invited him to meet us in Bangalore whenever he was there on that day. Interestingly, on that day we had our own mixer, like the Martian mixer as we call it, and we are like, why don't you come to the mixer and bring some of your bubble teas there, etc.
Mm.
Which were very well received by the audience, right? And we
Ah.
had a very great conversation with the founder. Even today, how many people can really comment about, is there a large bubble tea market in India? Right? It's still a big question today, right?
Mm.
uh, what can somebody who's building bubble tea and in the Korean ecosystem do that is significantly large and pushes the ball out of the park? But since the time we committed to the investment, which was around late last year till today, the growth has been phenomenal, right? And if you'll Google a little bit, you'll see the announcement of the fundraise and you'll see some numbers.
Yeah, yeah.
Company maybe like a 10-month or a 11-month old company and already doing some
Right.
significant numbers, right? So these experiments also have helped us think through newer sectors, newer variations, which may be very, very non-obvious, if I have to put it that way, right? And if you just put a specific structure around looking at investments, many of these companies will not make it through to the final funnel. But we keep changing the funnel a little bit, keep asking the right
Mm.
questions internally within our team, and try to support some of these companies as well. Pleasure has been ours, right? There's been significant learning that we've drawn from some of these ecosystem checks or experimental checks, as I call them.
Mm. That's great. I believe there is, a lot of space in the Indian ecosystem to have more operator VCs, as we call them, like Marshot, or, people who have been through such times and, such struggles, giving back to the society. I think US has that a lot, not much in India, but I think in very near future we'll see a lot of them, giving back to the society kind of uh, VCs. So yeah,
Yeah,
we're really hopeful.
yeah, I think there's some bit of stuff that has already started. You've probably
Yeah.
heard of a few operators who've set up their own funds today or have
Hmm.
structures that are similar to Marshot in some shape and form. Uh, the great part is that, and see, I came from traditional finance VC background, right? And and I could probably call myself a Mr. Know-it-all at that point. I've worked with so many companies on consulting, on VC, and and then comes a day when some founders are asking such pointed questions, and I have like level 1 answers, but my team that has built Razorpay had level 4 depth in some of the answers, right? And I was like, you
Hmm.
know what, I will always continue to learn if I work with the right operators, be it
Ah.
my team or my portfolio, right? So the level of insight, the level of empathy, the level of network that operators bring to the table, and especially people who've been behind companies that have become successful, and successful again is subjective, but successful in,
Hmm.
in, in some shape and form, right? You may have built a company that has gotten acquired. People may not call it successful, but that journey, of course, is very, very instrumental. You may have a company that might go IPO, might not do well later, but how many people have the experience? There's only, I think, 20-25 companies in the startup realm that have actually gone IPO from India, right? So maybe those 25 teams have that experience where startups are going to IPO. I think that giving it back is important, and some of them have actually structured it very nicely in a commercial manner that exists in the US as well. And there's a lot that
Hmm.
can be done, right? Even the fact that many VCs in India are now looking at operators to be added, founders to be added into the team,
Yeah.
right? So I think that change is I'm really welcoming that change.
And that's it is a welcoming change to be. Uh, That's totally true. Arjit, coming to the other side of the investments, the
Yeah,
source of the investments, majorly. So, right, I mean, Marshall VC is definitely a founder's fund. Uh, but, in general, talking about the VC ecosystem, a lot of investments that we see are either coming from the institutions, HNIs, ultra HNIs, right? But in India, we see still a lack of awareness about this asset class, right? There are a lot of investors who have this sort of capacity to enter into this space, to explore this asset class, put their check, give the risk capital to the ecosystem, but still maybe are unaware, or even if they are aware, they are not much inclined towards it, right? But the kind of things that you have mentioned about this, about our ecosystem, the things that are happening, next wave of innovation that's coming up. Uh, how do you think an investor should look at this? How would anyone from the VC ecosystem would convince an investor who's not inclined towards this particular asset class? And what should actually then be an investor mindset? And how should they approach this asset class?
got it. Yeah. So some of what I'm going to talk about is a little bit from my experience of interacting with LPs in my previous fund, which are mostly
Yeah.
institutional and very
Yeah.
hard to convince. And then
Okay.
because I've been in touch with a lot of other LPs because of my nature of work today, or LPs who are on my personal network. Some of my friends are also LPs, etc. So we keep having these conversations every now and then. So it's all borrowed. Happy to be corrected, but I think some of what I'm going to talk about may add some perspective to people who would love to understand this a little bit better, right? First of all, I think I would urge LPs to understand this asset class deeply, right? It's not an asset class which will be a significant portion of your overall wealth portfolio, right? So it has to be a small portion. It is your experimental bucket. Just like how
Yeah.
we have a small experimental bucket, this asset class is an experimental bucket. So you have to be really, really mindful of how much capital are you committing and how do you go about committing that capital. Uh,
Hmm.
Many LPs that I've interacted with keep telling me that these guys are pitching, those guys are pitching, minimum check size is that, maximum check size is that, etc. So some of them are really, really confused also. Some of them are experienced, but some of them, when they get approached by new GPs, they get a little confused about what to do, how to go about. So my only advice is that can you go deep and understand this asset class and don't depend on anybody else to explain it to you. You may have like platforms like Excluto who can actually go and help you with an unbiased sort of a thing, uh, and other LPs who've actually built some good
Yeah.
strategy here to understand this asset class and put a little bit of a strategy behind it to say that, hey, I have this much capital, I will divide it into these many funds, and the themes of the funds that I will choose will also be A, B, C, D, E, and then maybe multiplied by 2. So if I have to
Hmm.
invest in a consumer fund, I'll choose 2 consumer funds to invest. Just as an example, right? I may be 100% wrong eventually. If I want to choose in a fintech focused fund, I'll choose 2, right?
Hmm.
Because when you're entering into a fund which enters into startups, there's no guarantee that the portfolio is going to do well, right? And
Yeah.
yes, you have past performance, right? But past performance cannot always be 100% fail proof metric to rely on for future performance. So you have to understand, one, the asset class. Two, you have to understand the team behind it. So the
Hmm.
team also is very important. Like just the way when we evaluate startups, you need to evaluate the GPs and the team that they'll
Yeah.
build, the ethos that they'll build, right? So one, you understand the asset class. Two, you understand the team. So talk to the team to understand what is their motivation.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
sometimes even VCs or GPs may fail to be a lot more transparent in front of LPs, right? It is, of course, a controversial question, how transparent can you be? But if there is somebody who's investing capital into your company, you would
Hmm.
expect some level of trust, and trust can be built through transparency and maybe past track record, etc. So if a GP goes and explains the asset class really well to an LP, I think that builds a lot of trust. Then every time that LP is going to think about a new VC investment, he or she will call you and say, "Hey, what do you think about this fund?" And you're going to be
Hmm.
like, "Why are you asking me? They're competing with me, right?" But
Right.
they are the ones. You're the one who educated them any which way, right?
Uh,
In understanding the asset class. So I think that level of trust, that relationship, especially in this, right, where it's high risk, high return sort of an ecosystem, mostly high risk, right?
hmm.
Many companies fail. A few companies will actually return the entire fund and above, right?
Yeah.
So understanding
Yeah.
the team, their motivation, their experience, their method of working, doing some calls with their past portfolios to understand, especially portfolios that didn't go well, right? How does the team react to that,
Hmm.
right? And there's no good, bad,
Right.
ugly situation, right? It's all like if I want every single penny back as a LP, I want a GP who is great, makes great investments, but will also optimize for my returns. Even
Hmm.
if the company is not a great outcome, can we think about ways in which they can get acquired, still find a good home, some money comes back to the fund, etc. Somebody may have that sort of a flavor as well. Somebody may say, okay, I
Yeah.
don't want people who are like really really aggressive and pushing things and don't have that reputation. I want the halo effect sort of a reputation that my fund is the best, my GPs are the best, my reputation is like that halo effect, the LPs are the best as well, right? uh, which you may find in the impact side of things, etc. A little bit more. Uh, the third thing is the theme of investment, right? So, what are the themes they're going after? As I said, somebody's going after consumer, somebody's going after fintech, somebody's sector agnostic,
Hmm.
somebody's chasing SaaS, etc. And then when you look at theme, you have to understand every theme has its ups and downs. So, whenever you're entering, you can't say, okay, this theme is doing really well, let's invest in this fund. And then 2 years down the line, the theme is not
Hmm.
doing well. And you're like, I'm not committing to your second fund. Understand that theme deeply. See, ask your GPs, ask people in your network for insights around that theme before you make that decision. The fourth, and I think the most important, not the most important, one of the really important ones is the support system that the fund is setting up for the founders. So as I mentioned,
Hmm.
very lonely journey entrepreneurship. You need more and more people to open doors, to help you think through, to be your brainstorming buddies, to be your sounding boards, etc. So can you actually help LPs understand what is the support system that you've built, which is building network with other VCs, building network with corporates, building network with
Hmm.
angels, family offices, uh, operators, most important. Can somebody help them on sales? Can somebody help them on tech? Can somebody help them on fundraising? Can somebody help them on culture? Figuring out what is the best way to letting people go when things are not going really well and we don't have a lot of runway left. Special situation officers, all of that, right? So I think that is also significantly important, because all of this, this layer that I'm talking about can actually turn companies that are not doing well with some small fixes and pivots into companies that start doing really really well. And there are enough examples from the ecosystem as well that you'll hear your GPs pitch to you that हमारे portfolio में ये हो रहा था, हमने ऐसे गए,
Hmm.
इनसे हमने थोड़े इनको हमने किसी फैमिली ऑफिस से इंट्रोड्यूस किया, एक XYZ लार्ज कॉर्पोरेट यूएस के इन्वेस्टर से इंट्रोड्यूस किया, एंड थिंग्स जस्ट चेंज्ड, right?
Right.
Founders are also
Hmm.
amenable to making small changes, and then now this is a to be unicorn company or multi-bagger company for us later on, etc.
Hmm.
So I think
That's right.
that is also important. The other thing which I may urge potential HNIs, LPs to think through is, why are you investing in this asset? Right? One is financial gains, right? The
Yeah.
other bit is, what is it that is convincing you to invest here, right? So financial gains ke liye, if you want to invest, there are enough opportunities. Even in fixed income, you'll find enough opportunities to make some solid money. uh, in the market is doing what, 15% return every year. That's a solid number, yeah,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Anybody who's promising 5% more, is somebody, will you take that risk that this money can become 5% more of market or become nothing at all, right? So that
Hmm.
risk is hard, and which is why a lot of people don't get convinced, because people are thinking from a money lens, will not be able to easily understand or commit to this asset class. So
Hmm.
you
Right.
have to think a little bit beyond just returns. Excuse me. And what does that mean? That means, am I getting this platform to interact with some of the non-usual sharp minds of India, be it the GPs that I invest in, be it the founders that the fund will support, be it the other LPs that I may get a chance to speak with, right? And can I use this as an opportunity also to sort of network, right? You make money,
Hmm.
yes, your GPs will ensure that some money is being made. It is their responsibility to do it. But am I having exciting conversations? Am I able to figure
Hmm.
out some interesting things that are beyond my usual business or the fund, whatever the fund does, and find excitement in life?
Hmm.
Right? So, and excitement is a very loosely used term. Maybe I'll
Yeah.
define it a little bit more. But these interactions is something that maybe when you're thinking about your life on your deathbed, you'll be like, dude, I worked with some really
Hmm.
solid founders there. I helped them do something, even if it added 0.001% help in their journey.
Hmm.
But that's something that I do. You know, people say you relive your life in the last couple of minutes. What do you want to relive? Some
Yeah.
exciting thing you've done with the early stage ecosystem, working with the best minds. We're trying to do some non-linear stuff. You know, David trying to slay Goliath. I mean, those are things
Hmm.
that you will be like, okay, I had a satisfying life, right? So
Right.
in
Right.
that lens, a little bit. Uh, but what do I mean? Like, if I go to a deeper layer there,
Huh.
can you make yourself as an individual or the institution you represent available to your GPs and your portfolio? And maybe some GPs do not want it. Maybe they're like, dude, I'm raising money. I will come and tell you what help I need. Please help me then. But I think most GPs would welcome more
Hmm.
hands-on tech, as long as it's not interfering in a negative way with the operations of the fund or the operations of the startup, right?
Right.
For example, if I am looking at a founder who's building in the solar space and I have a LP who has a very large either solar manufacturing or solar installation EPC play, maybe a
Hmm.
conversation with them could help me understand that, does this young individual understand the space? Is what this young individual or experienced individual, uh, is he or she thinking in the right direction? And also as a check, right, as a GP, if Paritosh is the solar veteran of India and I bring an XYZ person to speak to him and Paritosh is like, dude, he's talking nonsense. And I'm like, in what way? Like, he knows the ecosystem or she knows the ecosystem, but her business model is something that we've never seen in the past. You know
Hmm.
what? That may be an interesting deal to evaluate, because there might be a new business model that could be coming into the solar space, which Paritoshan
Hmm.
has helped me underwrite in his own words, that great person, great understanding. I don't know about the business model. So then I'll go in deep to understand if this business model makes sense. Are there examples
Hmm.
of these business? So you've not given me a great feedback on this, but I've taken it as a great feedback as a GP, right?
Hmm.
Two, you probably say that, this is a gap. They are trying to address it. They're probably a great team to address it. I love to help.
Hmm.
Can I open doors, right? I do, let's say, manufacturing. They do, let's say, setting up these solar projects. I can
Hmm.
maybe at slightly discounted prices sell it to them, help them connect with the people who finance them, just as an example. uh, what is in it for me? One, excitement. Two, you're selling more stuff to people which other people don't even know about.
Hmm.
Your competitors don't even know about that. You're selling your manufactured panels or cables or whatever it is to a startup that is linearly scaling, and now you have a very strong relationship. So some if your
Yeah.
competitor to enter here, it's gonna be hard. Similarly, I think we've had a chat earlier about this. Similarly, if somebody is a distributor of FMCG
Yeah.
products, food products,
Mm.
if there is a D2C startup that is coming in today, I think physical presence, retail is something that has become of significant importance. Can you open doors and say that, dude, I will take your product and I'll put it in
Mm.
all the retailers that I know. Let me
Right.
do this for you. Yes, I'll charge you a fee because nothing's for free, but can that fee be less, or can the impact of the fee you give me be exponential, right? So that's go
Mm.
to market. That is advising the GPs as well, and then there's advising the founders too, right? Sometimes you're and see in my case, my LPs are the founding team at Razorpay, right? They're deeply involved
Mm.
on all three of these aspects, right? Which is helping me
Totally.
think through, helping my founders think through in a deeper manner and opening doors in an open manner, which makes it a lot more exciting for my portfolio, me, and my team.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I think that is something that I feel is interesting and which can be looked at in a very interesting manner to open doors for founders, and still you may not return on investment is, I feel, of two colors. One is the absolute capital, and then there is the absolute joy. So
Mm.
think about this, the second aspect that I'm talking about, that absolute joy of you giving back to the ecosystem, you working with these founders. Maybe you end up setting up something which is so groundbreaking. You may have the expertise, the power, the money, but the innovation comes from the founders, the innovation comes from the fund. Sometimes LPs become acquiring entities as well for founders, yeah, for their startup,
Mm.
right? So those are like
Right.
very best case scenarios, etc. So I think those are some of the things which I feel people should think about. A little bit of this should also spill over to interacting with your co-LPs, and some funds may be okay with it, some funds may not be okay with it, or doing it in a very high frequency. But that's totally up to the GP. You have to leave it to the GP. It's their ship, right? They're the captain. You're just the passenger in that journey. Uh, but if you get a chance to interact with other passengers, uh, explore other things that are just beyond the ship that I'm talking about, I think that
Yeah.
becomes interesting because they are also some of the sharp minds of India who have that sort of capital, who have that sort of thought process to go and support an early stage initiative as well.
Right. Right. It's always exciting to, talk to your colleagues who, or maybe, like you said, passengers who are in the same journey, right? It gives you confidence. It takes away the anxiety, a lot of stuff. Again, great. I mean, to summarize this whole LP thing, you have mentioned कि ROI के लिए तो आपके पास
बहुत
जगह
option.
है इंडिया जैसे पब्लिक मार्केट में जहाँ पे 12-15% आपको IRR मिल रहा है you it doesn't make sense that if you're just looking at ROI and then entering this asset class. It doesn't make sense. But this asset class gives you much more than ROI, right? It gives you business opportunities, maybe options to vertically integrate or horizontally integrate with some startup that a particular VC fund might have invested in, where you are an LP, राइट एंड नेटवर्किंग विद को एलपीज क्योंकि आप भले जयपुर में बैठे हो आप शायद कोलकाता में बैठे हो बट probably if you have invested in a particular VC and if there is a networking session then you might meet people from all walks of all parts of India or maybe even globally networking again a great thing so, very well explained, Arjit, and uh, I think that's this is sort of the last leg of our podcast. We have come to an end. So, as a closing remark, I would again ask you to sort of summarize as a whole where we are heading. I'm talking about the Indian startup ecosystem. Current scenario. What do you see in future? Of course, we are growing, but what's your take on it? How do you feel about it?
I think we're still scratching the surface, right?
Okay.
Uh, I think maybe some 70,000 startups exist today, and they're supposed to be doubled by 2030, is what
Hmm.
one of the reports by Inc. 42 were talking about. Uh, we just have 110 sort of unicorns. We've had 2025 listed companies. We've had like 1,200 M&A opportunities. Compare that to our population, right? Compared to our the
Mm.
speed at which we are seeing investment in the public market, if that is a sign, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of steam left in the Indian startup ecosystem, right? At the same time, because of availability of internet, availability of information, people who want to do non-linear things have access to information, education, and the network, right? Somebody from nowhere, even if they write to you or me and we stumble upon a message that is very well crafted and locks their intent, we will respond and we will say, okay, you want to do this, let us help you do it, right?
Mm.
So I think everybody has, I won't call it a level playing field, because of course privileges and networks and all may be a lot more easier for the affluent, but everybody has the opportunity to do something great. There are some very insane stories, maybe for another session, where I've heard of people who came from nowhere and now are building very large startups as well, right? And some of them
Mm.
are people that we celebrate today too. So I think the startup ecosystem is just starting. I think there are years and years of success, of growth that we still have to see. uh,
Mm.
Also, something that I sort of talked about, the operator capital of India. I think that is something which more and more founders will come out to sort of invest,
Mm.
not just their money, but actually their time and expertise with the upcoming founders, so that we're able to churn out more successful, sustainable stories, startups out on the world forum, and make India the greatest nation that has ever existed here. And I think a
Awesome.
lot of founders take pride building from India, going global, etc. And then of course there are a lot of things that are stacked against founders who are coming from India, building globally. How are they perceived, etc. A lot of that narrative is also changing. A lot of
Mm.
founders, executives from the West who are of Indian origin have also started giving back to the ecosystem, opening doors, etc. So I think it's something that I feel a little bit of a collaborative ecosystem would lead to uh, faster growth, which is exponential. And at the same time, I feel that I think we as a country are still to make a much deeper dent in the startup spectrum on the global front. We're still our third largest startup ecosystem, but volumes versus value. So I think the value quotient is still to go up significantly, and it's up to folks like you, me, and the other folks in the ecosystem to sort of catalyze that and see that rocket ship travel to Mars.
Very well said, Arjit. Really great. You have sort of boosted up my hopes as well. But again, thank you so much, for joining us today and talking to us. It has been a really, really great conversation with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paritosh. Pleasure's mine. And I had a great chat with you. Hopefully, this helps people to think differentially. And as I said, again, I'm happy to be corrected, proven wrong. Everything that we're trying to do, can be proven wrong, is an experiment. But the learnings from the experiment and the things that we don't do well may be instrumental in helping others who can, use these learnings and scale up significantly in achieving their goals.
Awesome, Arjit. Awesome.
All right, man.
Okay, thank you so much. Take care. Just I'll end the recording.